This summer looks set to be one of the most fascinating in football in recent memory, with the financial implications of the most recent season twinned with the remarkably brief off-season this year in comparison to most, promising for some unusual preparations for clubs ranging from those in the Champions League to those in non-league. Ahead of the 2020-21 campaign, which will be upon us any minute and in some countries has already begun, there will be many teams with eyes firmly fixed upon them. Here in England alone, there will be question marks over how Liverpool plan to defend their Premier League title, seemingly without spending a fortune if the Timo Werner saga is anything to go by. How will Manchester City reassert their domestic dominance? Can we expect to see Sheikh Mansour once again dipping into his incredibly deep pockets? What about Manchester United? Following a fantastic end to the season, Will Ed Woodward and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have begun to harbour ideas of a title push rather than mere Champions League qualification. And that is just at the top end of the Premier League. Further down the Football League pyramid, there are arguably even more intriguing and undoubtedly even more testing circumstances facing a myriad of different clubs. Meanwhile, it could be a fascinating summer in Spain, with Barcelona having had a torrid season, missing out on the La Liga title for only the second time in 8 seasons. So no doubt, they will be looking to make some significant moves. As you can see then, it's a summer which promises a great deal and could throw up 1 or 2 real surprises. So why then, outside of my own club of course, are AFC Bournemouth the team that has captured my attention more than any other? As most of you will know, Bournemouth were relegated from the Premier League this season, following 5 seasons in the top flight of English football. Manager Eddie Howe first took over at his boyhood club in 2008 when the team was in the League 2 relegation zone, but over the next 7 years, in 2 separate stints, the young Cherries boss took the club into the Premier League for the first time in their history. It is a miraculous rise, and one which is almost without precedent in the history of the English game in terms of going from the Football League's basement division to the top flight under the guidance of a single manager, and in 2015, Howe was named as the Football League's Manager of the Decade. But now, in this summer of uncertainty, Bournemouth have been stripped of their top flight status, Eddie Howe has left the club by mutual agreement, and the Cherries face question marks with regards to what the legacy of their stupendous ascent through the divisions will look like. Often when a team is relegated from the Premier League, you can get a decent gauge of whether they're a side likely to make an immediate push to return, or perhaps more likely, of dropping further down the English footballing pyramid. When Newcastle or West Brom suffered relegation in recent times, for example, they always looked set on retaining a strong core of players and even investing a little to bank on a Premier League return. Meanwhile, we have seen others like Sunderland, Huddersfield and my own club Hull City, who looked more likely, and in 2 cases already have, dropped down another division into League One. In Bournemouth's case, as things stand, I wouldn't like to hang my hat on either of those scenarios. They are a club in limbo, and the decisions they make this summer will likely define their future over the next decade and quite possibly beyond. The first question for Bournemouth, you might think, is picking the right man to replace Eddie Howe, but it actually runs much deeper than that. At the heart of it, Bournemouth have had a philosophy implemented by Eddie Howe and his coaching staff for more than a decade, and in many respects, it is what has defined the club and their rise through the leagues. Indeed, Bournemouth seemed to lose some of their footballing principles last season, and doing so saw them relegated on the final day of the season. They now face a real dilemma with regards to whether they stick to their guns and look to revitalise that style of play, recruiting both in terms of staff and players to suit the passing and pleasing on the ice style that has been a feature of their play at Dean Court for so many years, or whether they decide a change of tact is needed if they are to get back into the Premier League, looking to bring in someone a little more pragmatic who has their own ideas and recruit accordingly. The current new manager odds, at the time of this recording, have Jason Tindall as the frontrunner, followed by Lee Johnson, Chris Hughton, Paul Cook, Tony Pulis, Stephen Purchase, Harry Redknapp and Danny Cowley. The names in there really is a testament to the crossroads that Bournemouth are at this summer. Jason Tindall and Stephen Purchase are both long-term members of Eddie Howe's coaching staff, Tindall having been with the club since 2008, with the exception of his brief stint at Burnley with Eddie Howe, whilst Purchase joined Bournemouth for the second time in 2010 and has been part of the club's coaching staff since 2013. Both, therefore, would likely be continuations of the Eddie Howe approach, although coming from less experienced faces, neither of whom have any first-team managerial experience at Football League level. Then you have someone like Chris Hughton, who on the face of it may be the most obvious candidate, having previously won promotion with relegated clubs, someone who knows the division and a manager who has got results with both small and large budgets. However, Chris Hughton's football is not AFC Bournemouth's football, at least over the last 10 years. The former Brighton boss is a pragmatist who almost always prioritises defensive solidity and looks to build from there, with Brighton and Norwich supporters having grown frustrated at times with his football despite the fine overall work that he's done. Then you have Tony Pulis, who plays just about the most direct style of football in the entire Football League, and would be akin to Manchester City replacing Pep Guardiola with Sam Allardyce. Personally, I can't see Pulis getting the Bournemouth job, although I don't think he's the worst candidate on that list. That would have to be Harry Redknapp. If Bournemouth appoint Harry Redknapp, which they won't, but if they did, I would put my mortgage on him having left by Christmas with the club in and around the Championship relegation zone. The decision for Bournemouth's higher-ups, and ultimately for Maxim Demin, at the end of the day, is an even bigger one than just the first team. In this day and age, most new managers want to bring in an entire backroom staff. For so many years, Eddie Howe has permeated every facet of life at AFC Bournemouth, from the first team training and match preparations to the youth development and plans surrounding a new stadium and training ground. Unless Bournemouth appoint from within, they will likely lose the bulk of their first team staff and potentially even their youth team staff, and they certainly run the risk of losing the philosophy that has filtered down from the first team to their youth team since 2008. It is difficult to overestimate the importance of the Cherries' new appointment. Replacing someone who has been at a club for more than a decade is a near impossible task, as we have seen so many times in football. So whether they go for more of the same or a total change of tact, Bournemouth need a big character, someone who has the personality to replace Eddie Howe and won't feel in his shadow for even 1 or 2 months, because you have to hit the ground running in the Championship to have any chance of promotion. Bournemouth's new boss, whoever they are, will have major work to do in terms of restructuring that squad because, make no mistake, mass incomings and outgoings are coming at Dean Court. Nathan Ake already looks set to sign for Man City for £41 million. It seems likely that Callum Wilson will go. Ryan Fraser is out of contract and will leave, probably for Newcastle. Joshua King is bound to have plenty of suitors and will probably want to remain in the Premier League. David Brooks is a talent and has been linked with both Everton and Tottenham. Meanwhile, both Lloyd Kelly and Chris Metham have arguably shown enough in the Premier League to mean that Bournemouth will be very lucky if they don't have to stave off interest for the defensive duo over the next month. Throw in the fact that as well as Ryan Fraser, the likes of Charlie Daniels, Andrew Sermon and Simon Francis are all out of contract this summer, and you have virtually an entire 11 that could depart. And there are others, like Aaron Ramsdale, who it's not impossible someone would try to sign. Even for a relegated Premier League team, who always lose players, Bournemouth are staring down the barrel of an exodus of epic proportions. But that is not to say their situation is a hopeless one. Even stripped of the majority of their talent, the Cherries still have the bones of a very strong Championship side. They should still have a very good goalkeeper in Ramsdale, an experienced centre-back in Steve Cook, plenty of graft and talent in midfield through the likes of Ryan Gosling, Lewis Cook and Philip Billing, and a centre-forward who I think could be the real ace up their sleeve in the form of Dominic Solanke. Following a torrid couple of seasons of first-team football, Solanke just showed glimpses of what made him one of the hottest prospects in English football at one time towards the tail end of the season for Bournemouth. Solanke has all the tools to be a very good centre-forward. He's well built, athletic, he has a decent first touch, and he showed at youth team level that with some confidence, he can find the back of the net. If Bournemouth make good decisions in and around him this summer, I genuinely believe Dominic Solanke is capable of scoring 20 plus goals in the Championship, and suddenly that £90 million fee wouldn't look quite so absurd. Another man who I think is very likely to remain at Bournemouth over the summer is Junior Stanislas, and that would be great news for Cherries fans. A bit part player the last time Bournemouth were in the Championship, Stanislas can be electric at his best, and he was Eddie Howe's best player following the restart among an admittedly insipid bunch. Again, if the Cherries get things right, Stanislas is good enough to take the Championship by storm. So the talent will still be there, in key areas, even if Bournemouth lose the bulk of their starting 11. The bigger question may well be whether they have the heart and desire to fight over 46 games to get Bournemouth back in the Premier League. Character is so important in football. Man for man, if you look at the Bournemouth team that finished 9th in the Premier League in 2016-17 and the one that finished in the relegation zone this season, the team this season is arguably more gifted. The difference is that Eddie Howe lost big characters like Mark Pugh, Harry Arter, and even someone like Mark Wilson who hardly played that season but is just an experienced older head and the right kind of person you want in the dressing room. In many respects, Bournemouth seem to have lost a bit of character this season, and a dishevelled and disheartened Eddie Howe at times seemed like he no longer had a starting 11 that he could fully trust in the way in which he did just a season or two ago. Sometimes that's just what happens when you've had the same ideas, and a sense of comfort creep in over a long period of time, and the fresh impetus of a new appointment could whip Bournemouth's ailing side into shape. But it could also be a problem that runs much deeper. In the Championship, even more than in the Premier League, it is so important to have the right characters. Over the last 2 seasons, I would maintain that Stoke City have had more individual talent in their squad than Leeds United, but whilst Leeds finished 3rd and then 1st, Stoke finished 16th and then 15th. The Championship is a slog, a grueling 46-game test of a team's mental capabilities just as much as their technical ones, and the teams that succeed are the ones who can string some kind of consistency together over the course of the season. It's for that reason that if I was appointed as the next Bournemouth boss, which seems unlikely, I'd be fighting tooth and nail to keep someone like Harry Arter at the club, provided he wanted to stay. Since he is a canny midfield operator, with a bit of graft and gal, he knows the division, he's still only 30, and he's a good lad to have in the dressing room. Whether Bournemouth appoints someone from within or externally, and whether they look to play pretty football or to win by any means necessary, recruitment of the right people, as well as the right players, will be so key to their success or failure next season. If they get their recruitment right, with a nice combination of hungry, capable Championship footballers with a point to prove, with a mix of youth and experience, I think they will have the makings of an excellent Championship team. With a solid back line, they should have plenty of flair and invention in midfield, and a potential Championship goal machine in Solanke. If they get their recruitment wrong and bring in too many players who aren't up for the fight, who are unfamiliar with the rigours of the Championship, and who are not 100% invested in the future of the club and winning promotion back to the Premier League, they could be in real trouble. It's for that reason that I see Bournemouth as the most interesting club in English football ahead of next season, because there are so many variables, such a great divide about the direction in which the club could go, and such crucial fate in terms of the future of the club hanging on those decisions. What has happened at Bournemouth over the last 12 years has been a stratospheric rise for historical minnows, but it's so important that clubs of Bournemouth's stature are left with a legacy following their success. For a long time, there has been talk of a new ground and training facilities on the south coast, but that hasn't happened, and the financial implications of relegation and a lack of fans in the ground next season may put both projects under serious pressure. As a Hull City fan, I'm fortunate to have seen my club rise from the 4th tier to the Premier League in a very short period of time, and just like Bournemouth, we have had 5 seasons in the top flight in total. The risk for Bournemouth, if they don't make the right decisions this summer and make long-term arrangements, is that they end up like Hull City, having had a golden era by the club's standards, but no legacy to show for it. For our 5 seasons in the Premier League, Hull City don't have state-of-the-art youth facilities or a Category 1 academy, and our training ground looks like the porter cabins you used to have your geography lessons in at school. Perhaps that is the gravest danger for the Cherries this summer, and why so much rests on the next 30 days at Dean Court. Fortunately for Bournemouth, they don't appear to be run by someone with the mind of a 12-year-old sociopath, so hopefully they'll be alright. That is it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, especially any Bournemouth fans out there. What avenue do you think the club will take this summer? Thank you all as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to HITC Sevens, and make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram if you enjoy my work at all, where the username is simply @HITC Sevens on both platforms.